No, we don't use that word.
Oh, I'm sorry.
30%.
Your elbow is just the same.
Okay.
Elbow is able.
That's true.
Say now you body.
Everybody ready?
Ableist.
Our framework for the debate is that you should vote for the team that provides the best collaborative framework or form of engagement. This means that your role as a judge is to vote for the negative if you believe our performance added to the positive collaboration of the 1AC performance. They failed to engage in the 1AC. This also means that they don't get a permutation and the ability to question the competition of our critiques, which will be the counterperm and the 1 and R. This is the best framework for critical debate since it allows the best form of theorization that maximizes education and activity. Collaborative engagement causes debaters, judges, and spectators to take away with what they learn in the round as part of the dialogue meant to actually spur action. This call for collaboration is not the same thing as coalition or solidarity since everyone has their own projects and no one should be forced to accept the first white person asking to be included because they voted for Obama. Instead, collaboration is the name of being allies and working toward the same goal of total social liberation. We will all take different, sometimes contradictory routes to achieve this goal. Debate should be about discerning which routes best serve other allies without undermining other movements that they see to achieve the same thing. They do not give you a role of the ballot or the way that you should evaluate this debate round, which means that we have the only debate, the only way for you to be able to approach the way this debate should be understood in terms of the context of how you would actually judge this debate, which means that we're the only ones who give you all a space in the debate round to actually be able to insert your own agency in order to be able to engage in the collaborative process, whereas they have a space where they teach, where their speech becomes an act of mothering that you can then take to do something else with, opposed to being able to allow this space to be an act of mothering or part of the ability for you to rework what home is for yourself within the space of itself. Now, our alternative to this methodology for collaboration was creating the non-human. Our work evidence explains its understanding of how the human and non-human populations are constantly defined and redefined in ways that produce a politics of inclusion so that blacks, homosexuals, and indigenous populations can be labeled as animals while dolphins and gorillas are having their personhood debated about in the courts. It means accepting that we will never have a perfectly straight solution to solving any of the problems, that the straight path will often be the most efficient, often the most dangerous. It is the realization that our advocacies are never perfect and that our alternatives must always be striving to do more and be better because liberation is always a process where there's always more work to be done. Listen, I get that I am a white male settler colonist, which gives me certain privileges to participate in patriarchal forms of anti-blackness, and that nothing I could do to have not participate in violent forms of production for both humans and non-humans alike. The entire SUNY system where I work is all furniture produced throughout their campus, produced by prisoners who are mostly black, and are prisons owned by the same Sodexo Corporation that contracts all the food served at Binghamton University. And I understand that just not having Sodexo created the tournament that I host isn't going to topple the prison industrial complex that allows for the same corporation that locks up people of color to pay for the slaughter of millions of non-human animals served every year at debate tournaments. What our alternative for queering the non-human means for me is that I continue to push myself to always do more. What it means in the context of our framework is that you should vote for the team that best embodies the ongoing form of engagement. Ours does this best because it better builds off the way to make transforms and makes better mothers and to be able to figure out the ways to create communities and recreate new understandings for what it means to be in homes or create homes that don't reify old dynamics of racism, homophobia, and environmental structures. Every time they make a joke about what I do not know or what I cannot participate in, this is offense for us because it shows the ways in which they do not allow for a form of growing or a form for us to constantly be able to get necessarily better. If I do not know something, this is something that I should be able to struggle with and be able to have this dynamic. And even if there's an opacity where I should not be able to know or should be told what these things are, to be able to say that this is a dissat or a reason for why I should be excluded from these sort of spaces, these are ways that prevent people from being able to actually become allies even in separate spaces where they are able to exist independently. Breeze Harper is a black feminist vegan who's underemployed and raising children. She struggles to obtain childcare in order to attend conferences and sometimes brings her infants and toddlers along with her. She cooks foods which she wants to and for herself and her family, and she doesn't prescribe a diet for anyone, and neither does our critique. Instead, she suggests a way of thinking where black motherhood can be reimagined in ways that empowers black communities. Again, obviously I'm not a black mother, but what she says deeply impacts the way I approach being a white father and thinking about the environment I raise my kids in. And I am not advocating as a singular approach to all black mothers should adopt. However, I am advocating in the debate it's the optimal path of collaboration and advancing total social liberation. She writes, I tend to think that one diet is not for everyone, but when I do look at it, look more at animal suffering, vegan does make sense that they are eating in a way that they want to, but also makes non-human animals not suffer. And then I go to look deeper. After you look at environmental racism, environmental justice, you look at the data about what communities are being affected by industrialized farming and pollution. You aren't seeing that it's going to white suburbia. You're seeing it making it into low-income communities of colors, making these connections in a form of anti-racism for black people. When you start incorporating a more plant-based diet, looking at the fact that animal foods and consumption is greatly contributing to greenhouse climate change, those are being most affected by climate change, once again, are not the upper echelon societies. People of color are being most affected. The animal rights, agriculture, and complications and connected environmental racism, health discrepancies. When you ask me, is it an appropriate diet for black people? I think that within the context, it might actually be a more helpful diet for black people in terms of thinking more critically about how to engage in anti-racism and engage in liberation in a way that isn't just about you and the individual household that you are in, but literally about the hundreds of communities of color throughout the world that are suffering from exploitation of people and non-human animals. When you think about how disproportionately those suffer from income as a community of color, my focus is primarily in black America, listening to people talk about how they suffer from racism, but also from lack of nutritional awareness, and how I actually think those are connected. I think these are damage to colonialism and racism. That's what it looks like now, and it's like that you don't even realize that there are other options. It's like just that black people are this is all people just because most people have their planes colonized. You see it manifest differently. White people have been colonized too. You see see how they think, and they go about things. Food is a great way to start talking about the way people can conceptualize freedom and how one can conceptualize liberation. Food is very intimate, it's not subjective at all. It has a history, it has an amazing point to start discussing social justice and start discussing food justice and all the other things that can't be ignored, whether it's a black community or any community. At home, I clearly have an easier time being vegan than most people in the debate community have being vegetarian at home. I don't live in a food desert. However, I know of community gardens and farms popping up around inner cities across the nation. I try to devote some of my time and finances to helping those initiatives. One's in Binghamton are led by some strong collaborative efforts of feminists, transgender individuals, mothers of color who are also teaching each other about nutrition and working together to make vibrant communities. At debate tournaments, we all have the privilege to register vegetarian, and because of healthier debater initiatives across the country, we know that tournaments are obligated to provide our nutritional needs with no additional cost. We want to see Spiegel and Wolf Evans speak to the way in which that if we are able to open our ideas to what constitutes consumption and the way that we are able to actually engage in the food that we consume, that we'll be able to create a better form of social liberation. Now, they make arguments about how we have a form of self-determination that is fundamentally European in standard. Our assumption is not that self-determination is European. Their 1AC to call for have a respect to self-determination over our own body and own spot is foundationally necessarily European in the way that they go about understanding what self-determination is. Otherwise, I challenge the 1AC, 1AR to decide what their self-determination is that is not Eurocentric. Second is they have a strategy that's necessarily, it starts with identity. That's the Bell and Russell evidence that'll be extended in the 1 and R3. The 2AC is silent. The question of what we actually consume or what we should consume, which means that they want to say stop developing the ocean. They should have a call to stop actually fishing in the oceans, which is fundamentally absent from all of their speech. To say the alternatives is trying to have a white man tell them what to do. That is not true whatsoever. But when they make these arguments, they also say that it's specific to a black trans woman. This is a static identity. If it's not, they say it's based upon self-identification and cross-examination, which means a human-based identification, because a fish cannot tell you how they identify as woman or not human. A neuter cat is neither woman nor male, nor is be able to fun with the lexicon of that. And third, there's alternatives Joe just said, because I could be able to identify whatever sort of way that I would want to, and they should not be able to force an identity on them. He criticizes that Miguel's performance is not queer. This begs the question of what constitutes a queer performance, proves how they are trying to create a static notion of what queerness is and trying to be able to locate it down to a specific thing. He gives a history of black performance and debate. I respect that history and I think it's very important. However, he says it's important for black people to survive. This is not a question of the human. He specifically uses the word people there and references people who identify as people, not as dogs or as cats or as cows, but as people who identify as people, which means it shows that their project is necessarily quoted in regards to humanism. He makes the argument that we are just a white anthro-activist. That is not true because we do not have a prescription. We are a collaboration. That's on the top of the debate, and our Harvard evidence also answers this argument. He makes the opacity dissent. Big dissent here is that you invited me here, which means that you should be voted against for having invited me here in the first place to be able to take place in this debate, which is terminal solvency, take out to your ability to be opaque. Second is that I'm queer and I'm here. You should not assume my identity and assume that I do not have a trans identity either. We attempt to try and do this necessary creates a static attempt of what would be queer or was not queer. And third is that we would be able to solve that in terms of collaboration. You should be able to keep the opacity. We are not asking to become part of your movement or be able to tell what I should be able to do in individual circumstances. We should be allies together, focusing for social liberation and struggles. However, we will have different paths that we'll be able to take. The purpose of this debate for you to be able to vote for the team that necessarily creates a better strategy or a better methodology for us to be able to have one that does not undermine the project of the other. If we win any of our links towards will up into one and R, that proves that their project necessarily undermines the ability to be able to question anything that has to do with species outside a people-dominated sense of how species can be defined. None of their cross-examination is going to be about how we define human or animal or creative design is not true. Our work evidence specifically is painfully obvious on the fact that we are a criticism of that. Cross-ups.
You said we focus on trans misogynoir and that is static identity, right? We actually say that's part of a larger structure of hierarchy, which structures all other forms of oppression.
You say it's specific for trans.
Yes, that is one specific form of oppression. When do we say that is the totalized?
You say that that's what it's for, and that I don't understand it because I say that it could be a bunch of different people, but it's specific for these people. Use the word specific.
You're not getting the question, Joe. The question is, at one point in the 1AC, we talked about trans misogynoir specifically. Why does that foreclose the rest of the 1AC that specifically handles the question of humanity?
Because your 2AC says that it's specific for trans
that one
black
specific
women.
form of oppression.
You say it is that is
I didn't say it was the only
for.
form of oppression.
My question is then, how is it that it
There's
seems...
There's an asterisk to trans that includes so many other things. Who said it was static? Nothing to do.
Well, you then get up here and give a definition of what it is, and then that definition comes
But
out
she
of
actually said in
self-identification.
cross-examination.
That includes all the other different types of trans populations that would then exist. You then create an
Yes,
opacity dissent that then would be able to exclude me without being able to ask or even get the ability to ask.
No. The opacity dissent was you being white. White people should know shit. That is independent from your other forms of identity.
Right, which means that you're also creating a static notion of whiteness as well within that.
We created Wait. We created that? And what other forms of whiteness are there besides slave masters, sir?
Well, in fact, whiteness is something that has been defined by its ability to be fluid and constantly be able to redefine itself. Jews,
Yes.
for instance, at one point were defined as black and then defined as white.
Right.
In order to be able to
And they
continue to
changed that
say-
by being what?
by creating a form of whiteness that becomes then centrified.
By creating one form
Right,
of whiteness.
which is not static, but it shows the way that it evolves over time and history and places. What is white in America is different than what is white in the Dominican Republic.
But the fact remains that whoever is considered white in those spaces is always on top, right?
Whiteness is defined in a hierarchical relationship, yes. Whiteness in
Cool,
terms of
cool.
being,
Are you white?
I would identify as myself as having the privilege of being white.
Right. So would that privilege not hinder you engaging these sort of movements?
I think that when I
Specific
engage
to
these
black
sort
queer
of
women.
movements, right, like when I'm in a movement with black queer women, my job is to listen to what they have to say, right?
That's interesting because what was my call for the ballot? Is what I see.
Your call for the ballot was to respect the self-determination.
Okay, so then I'm confused as to why you said I didn't have one.
There is not a definition of how that is realized within their
Why do
ballot.
white people really need definitions though? Why do you need a definition? Why do you need to know that?
I mean,
What
I
is
would
this
think
drive
that,
to
I would think
always
that the
know
judges who will then decide the round, or the people who are
The
attempting to
judges
learn from
already
the
know.
debate
The
round.
judges the people who need to know it already know. Why do you need to know?
I don't need to know. Right? My argument is not about that I need to know, and in fact, I have a long stance about how, in terms of opacity, is not about me just becoming a part of your movement, but a way forward with driving how collaboration takes place.
Okay. One and all. The flow this next to the permutation. I don't know what's so funny. Alright, is everyone ready? Here's that counter permutation he was talking about. Do the add through the methodology, the critique, the counter perm justifies since it locates competition to the point of difference between the two approaches. Any reason why the counter perm is bad is bad is reason why the permutation is also bad. It should be rejected first. Counter permutation allow for a better collaborative engagement in the same way that black feminists added to the black power movement, not by rejecting black power, but by adding something unique that should be affirmed as a better form of struggle for social justice. In the same way, our counter permutation is not a rejection of the one you see, but a call for you to vote negative in order to create a better form of engagement that gets at the root of the problem in order to create a nutritional form of mothering that better solves for the absent impacts while avoiding the links of our critique. And even if you don't buy this counter permutation, they don't get a permutation since you should evaluate debate as a question of competing methodologies. The permutation would be impossible because it means that taking the sovereignty method of the 1AC and pairing it with the deconstruction of our methodology. This skews out the 1AC representations. Defending these methodologies is a key negative ground. The abs shouldn't be allowed to skew out of the methodologies by arbitrarily claiming that they can work together. This ground is key to education and activism. The next methodology is queering the non-human, while the abs based on self-determination, black mothering, and Yamaya. While our methodology is inclusive of parts of theirs is not inclusive of ours, which means that our methodology is a better starting point. In order for us to test the true solvency of both of our methods, they have to be judged competitively. Instead of status quo debate being a training ground for neoconservative Nazis, you should affirm our vision of debate, which allows us to use our limited time and revolutionary energy to test our revolutionary tactics and strategies. This also means that if we win any of our links, that their permutation would also have to sever out of the 1C representations. All of our links are disadvantages to the permutation, except our Yamaya link, the validation of the human depiction of a goddess Yamaya as a human that rules over and even births non-human descendants from millions in a manner in which the human race is continually abnormally scientifically give birth to factory animals in the status quo that are using every debate tournament to feed hungry debaters to be consumed. Yet the factories of these prisons go unspoken. They make the argument that people interpret Yamaya differently. Well, sure they do, but there's still some consistencies within the way in which she's depicted. She's always depicted as having some human quality within them, even if she is a mermaid. She's always she's always gendered in the first place. Furthermore, one thing that's consistent in European religion is offerings to all types of gods, and these offerings usually happen to be non-human animals, similar to how humans offer similar to how when people are inviting somebody over for dinner, they're feeding somebody a non-human food. Even if we use Wikipedia, so does everybody else. We're the only ones reading evidence on this question anyways. In the 1AC, we just have Instead of just relying upon their arbitrary definitions of whatever they want your mind to be, which is ploy just to be a moving target and spike out of our links, which is voted for fairness education. Not only is Yemaya a goddess that gives birth to non-human animals understood as human and female, but she paradoxically responsible for taking care of all of our quote-unquote little children, which is similar to how white people have discourse of the quote-unquote black sapphires that exist in status quo. Secondly, their goal of self-determination is intrinsically one of human supremacy because it looks only for humanity to determine their destiny. Paul Taylor eloquently warns that this determination is valuable for whom? Only humans, because non-humans are understood as having the capacity to determine their fate instead of being determined by human beings in the first place. Non-humans are left absent from historical canons and narratives. Non-human beings are shrouded in silence, and the human-animal divide, which calls upon human agency, rests upon all these rests upon this divide in the first place, and not discussed in a normalized way in which we envision the world. Just like other discourses of human normalcy, it limits possibilities that are even taking into question the non-human inequity involved in all human enterprise. Speciesism is interlinked with all human oppression, which includes racism, sexism, homophobia, or any other forms of oppression found within the human condition. The alternative has the ability to solve the impacts on intrinsic app, but the one in C can now solve back for the impacts of the one in C. Now they make those arguments about black being non-human, but first our atoms of bell evidence directly unites their attempt to claim blackness in the space of non-humans, since it uses the non-human as an absent referendum, and then talk about theories of oppression. Two, our Rourke evidence also criticizes the maneuver of being anti-queer, since it attempts to monetize the difference in order to say that all non-humans are the same instead of embracing differences that exist while recognizing differences in social structures. And three, their argument isn't true, otherwise non-whites would be served at tournaments instead of participating in rounds. Their attempts to merely claim the space of non-human asserts a trickle-down version of rights that never actually trickles down. Any risk of a link means that you vote next as alternative solves for the case. And four, this argument is, if this argument is true, it proves that alternative can actually solve for the case, since querying non-humans can adjust the plight of all others who are considered less than human by using the starting point of the non-human instead of the starting point of the Homo sapien. And five, addressing speciesism through a lens of race turns non-humans into absent referent in order to solidify oppression and make impossible challenge to neither. This is Adams 94. Through the structure of absent referent dialect, the absence of presence of oppressed groups occurs. The structure of the absent referent requires the system of those of the chief elimination of the animal, the interest connection between the oppression of animals through further trait and oppression of blacks, and the analyzing the oppression of human beings and the oppression of animals are not to be ignored. However, the absent referent, because of its absence of experiencing connection to the oppressed groups, while other becomes alert to the function of the absent referent use of metaphors relying on animals oppressed, constantly criticize metaphor from which it is derived in the first place. Which means that our whole argument is that there's not just a link of omission, but it's a link of commission, because the evidence indicates that when you focus on things like race identity, it means that you're necessarily obscuring the type of oppression that occurs to non-human animals.
Alright, cool.
Take a breath.
Yeah.